friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Warcraft in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Warcraft. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it all. Interesting facts about this movie. In today's video, I'm going to tell you. I am also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Warcraft, alternatively known as Warcraft: The Beginning, is a 2016 American action fantasy film based on the video game series of the same name. Directed by Duncan Jones, who co-wrote with Charles Leavitt, it stars Travis Fimmel, Paula Patton, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Toby Kebbell, Ben Schnetzer, Robert Kaczynski, and Daniel Wu. The film follows Anduin Lothar of Stormwind and Durotan of the Frostwolf clan as heroes set on opposite sides of a growing war, as the warlock Gul'dan leads the Horde to invade Azeroth using a magic portal. Together, a few human heroes and dissenting orcs must attempt to stop the true evil behind this war and restore peace. The film was first announced in 2006 as a project partnership between Legendary Pictures and the game's developer, Blizzard Entertainment. Warcraft premiered in Paris on May 24, 2016, and was released by Universal Pictures in the United States on June 10, 2016. The film grossed $47.4 million in the United States and $439 million worldwide, based on its considerable success in China, where it grossed $225.5 million, becoming the highest-grossing film based on a video game at the time. However, it failed to reach its break-even point of $450 to $500 million after global marketing and distribution, and the film received generally negative reviews from critics. Plot: Draenor, homeworld to the orcs, is being torn apart by a force known as Fell Magic. Orc warlock Gul'dan unites the orc clans into the Horde and creates a portal to another world, Azeroth, by using Fell Magic to drain the life out of captive Draenei. Gul'dan leads a small warband through the portal to capture and sacrifice prisoners on Azeroth to bring the Horde. Durotan, chieftain of the Frostwolf clan, his pregnant mate Draca, and his friend Orgrim Doomhammer join this initial warband. On Azeroth, Draca goes into labor, and Gul'dan rescues Goel, the dying baby, by draining the life out of a deer to revive and infuse him with Fell Magic. The orcs raid settlements throughout Azeroth. Anduin Lothar, commander of the human forces of Stormwind Kingdom, finds trespassing mage Khadgar investigating the bodies of the slain men. Khadgar notices the bodies contain traces of Fell Magic. Stormwind's king, Lane Rin, sends them to the stronghold Karajan to inform Medivh, the guardian of Tirisfal, of the Fell Magic's presence on Azeroth. Lothar, Khadgar, and Medivh join a scouting team following traces of Fell Magic, but are ambushed by orcs. Medivh uses a spell to kill the Fell-corrupted orcs, leaving the Horde's warchief Blackhand to flee along with Durotan and Orgrim. The team takes a half-orc slave, Garona, as prisoner, but Lane releases her in exchange for loyalty to Stormwind. Garona leads the humans to spy on the orc camp, where they learn of Gul'dan's plan to bring the Horde to Azeroth. While studying a book found in Medivh's library, Khadgar realizes that Gul'dan had help from someone in Azeroth opening the portal. Despite Orgrim's objections, Durotan meets with Lane secretly to unite the Frostwolf clan and the humans against Gul'dan, but the group is ambushed by Blackhand. Medivh forms a magical barrier to protect the humans' retreat, but Lothar's son Callan is separated from the group and killed by Blackhand. Medivh is weakened, and Garona and Khadgar take him back to Karajan to recover. Khadgar eventually realizes that Medivh is the one who helped Gul'dan, having been corrupted by Fell Magic. At the orc camp, Blackhand purges the Frostwolf clan. Orgrim helps Draca to escape. After sending Goel down a river in a basket, Draca is found and killed. Durotan challenges Gul'dan to Mak'gora, a duel to the death for leadership of the orcs. During the fight, Gul'dan violates the honorable combat rules by draining the life out of Durotan with magic, killing him and earning the disapproval of the orcs watching. He then empowers Blackhand with the same magic. Medivh, now in a half-demonic state, starts to open the portal to Draenor, and Gul'dan begins sacrificing the captured humans to allow the rest of the Horde to enter Azeroth. Lane leads the human army in an assault on the orc camp, while Lothar and Khadgar fight Medivh and destroy the demon that began to manifest on the outside. Medivh is mortally wounded and uses the last of his strength to close the portal to Draenor. He then opens a portal to Stormwind, allowing Lane to evacuate most of the freed prisoners. Medivh dies and the portal closes, leaving Lane, Garona, and a small number of human soldiers to fight the orcs. Lane secretly orders Garona to kill him, bringing her honor among the orcs and putting her in a position of power to bring peace between the two races. Garona reluctantly does so and is welcomed into the Horde by Gul'dan. Lothar arrives to retrieve King Lane's body, but is confronted by Blackhand, who challenges Lothar to Mak'gora, with Lothar defeating and killing him, avenging Callan's death. Against Gul'dan's demands, the orcs, bound by tradition, allow Lothar to depart with Lan's body. During Lane's funeral, the leaders of the other human nations, along with the High Elves and Dwarves, proclaim an alliance against the orcs and support Lothar as the leader of the alliance. Elsewhere, Orgrim takes one of Durotan's tusks to one day give to Goel. The basket containing Goel is found by a human. Cast Travis Fimmel as Anduin Lothar, the military commander of the human forces at Stormwind Kingdom in Azeroth. Steadfast and charismatic, Lothar is a knight who has sacrificed everything to keep the king and his people safe. Paula Patton as Garona, a strong-willed half-orc caught between the war of orcs and humans. Ben Foster as Medivh, the guardian of Azeroth, and a mysterious and reclusive protector who wields formidable magical power. Dominic Cooper as King Lane Rin, the ruler of the Stormwind Kingdom in Azeroth and a beacon of hope for his people in times of darkness, and Lothar's brother-in-law. Toby Kebbel as Durotan, a noble orc chieftain of the Frostwolf clan and the father of Goel. He fights to save his clan and the rest of the renegade orcs from Gul'dan and the destruction of their world. Kebbel also portrays the Archmage Antonidas, leader of the Kirin Tor, the Mage Council of Dalaran. Ben Schnetzer as Khadgar, a gifted young mage who was trained at a young age by the Kirin Tor to succeed Medivh as guardian, but left and eventually found his place in the Stormwind Kingdom. Robert Kaczynski as Orgrim Doomhammer, Durotan's best friend and second-in-command of the Frostwolf clan. Clancy Brown as Blackhand, the fearsome orc chieftain of the Blackrock clan and puppet of Gul'dan. Daniel Wu as Gul'dan, a sinister orc warlock who is the founder and leader of the Horde, wielding powerful fell magic and driven by his ravenous desire for power. Ruth Nega as Queen Taria, Queen of Stormwind, King Lane's wife and Anduin's sister. Anna Galvin as Draka, Durotan's mate and the mother of Goel. Callum Keith Rennie as Moros, the caretaker of Karajan and Medivh's assistant. Berkeley Duffield as Callan, Lothar's son, Ryan Robbins as Karos, Dean Redman as Varys Caged Frostwolf. In addition, Terry Notary provides the voice and motion capture for Grommash Hellscream, the orc chieftain of the Warsong clan, though the part is listed in the credits as Peon. Notary also served as stunt coordinator and movement coach for the film, working with cast members Kebbel, Kaczynski, Brown, Wu, and Galvin on their portrayals of the orcs, and with Foster on his portrayals of magic. Michael Adamthwaite appears as King Magni Bronzebeard, the dwarf ruler of Ironforge. Glenn Close makes an uncredited appearance as Elodie, an ancient mage locked in an artifact within Dalaran, described as the guardian before there was a guardian. In the comics, Elodie was the first guardian of Tirisfal and a male half-elf, while the character in the film is closer to that of Egwene, Medivh's mother. Chris Metzen, who served as a co-producer and uncredited story writer for the film, and is the Senior Vice President of Story and Franchise Development at Blizzard Entertainment and the voice of Thrall in the Warcraft franchise, makes an uncredited cameo appearance as a turbaned perfume vendor on the streets of Stormwind Kingdom. Production, development, and pre-production. The project was officially announced in May 2006-5, with Blizzard initially wanting it to be set in the universe of the real-time strategy, Warcraft, Orcs and Humans video game from 1994. This setting was later dropped because Blizzard decided that it would be too similar to The Lord of the Rings. Initially scheduled for a 2009 release, the film would not see a release in that year. By Comic-Con 2011, the film was announced to still only be in the development stage. Uwe Boll made a bid to direct, but was turned away by Blizzard, who he claims to have said, "We will not sell the movie rights, not to you. Especially not to you. Because it's such a big online game success, maybe a bad movie would destroy that ongoing income, what the company has with it." Sam Raimi was initially attached to direct, but was replaced by Duncan Jones in January 2013. Upon coming aboard, Jones immediately voiced his displeasure at the script, which he stated was the stale fantasy trope of humans are the good guys, monsters are the bad guys. With Blizzard's approval, who had also been looking to change the story, Jones altered the story so that it's 50-50. Jones also faced personal struggles during filming, as his wife was diagnosed with breast cancer soon after Jones took over, and his father, David Bowie, died from cancer late in production. Jones thus summed up the challenge by telling the New York Times, "My film started and ended with cancer." At San Diego Comic-Con in July 2013, a concept trailer was presented, featuring a battle between a human and an orc. Paul Dano, Travis Fimmel, Anson Mount, and Anton Yelchin emerged as the frontrunners for the lead role, with Fimmel winning the role in October 2013. On December 4, 2013, the main cast of the film, consisting of Fimmel, Ben Foster, Paula Patton, Dominic Cooper, Toby Kebbell, and Robert Kaczynski, was announced. Idina Menzel, Debbie Gibson, Julie Delpy, Allison Eastwood, and Leighton Meester were also considered for the role of Garona Halvorsen. On December 14, 2013, Universal added Daniel Wu and Clancy Brown to the cast. In early March 2014, newcomer Berkeley Duffield joined the cast. Filming, principal photography began on January 13, 2014 and lasted for 4 months, finishing on May 23, 2014. Filming took place primarily in Vancouver among other locations. Post-production lasted 20 months. Regarding the use of computer-generated imagery, Jones said it's a tool like any other. It can be done well, and it can be done shit. The best CGI has you forgetting that it's CGI and accepting the visual as whatever it is supposed to be, like props. No one has an issue with props in film, do they? Cinematographer Simon Duggan stated the film had a long prep of about 12 weeks in addition to the 18 weeks of shooting. Music? Warcraft original motion picture soundtrack is the soundtrack. This music was composed by Ramin Djawadi and released on June 10, 2016. Djawadi was hired by Jones and Legendary Pictures in October 2014. The vinyl version of the soundtrack was released on September 5, 2016. Release theatrical. Warcraft was set to be released on December 18, 2015. But following the announcement of the coinciding release of Star Wars: The Force Awakens, the release was pushed back to the following year. The film premiered at the Le Grand Rex in Paris on May 24, 2016. It was released in the United Kingdom on May 30, 2016, in the United States on June 10, 2016, and in Australia on June 16, 2016. Home media. Warcraft was released on digital download on September 13, 2016, and was released on Blu-ray, Ultra HD Blu-ray, Blu-ray 3D, and DVD on September 27 in the United States and Canada. Select editions of the physical release include a digital copy of World of Warcraft along with digital bonus codes for other Blizzard games to tie in with the film. Box office. Warcraft grossed $47.4 million in the United States and $391.7 million in other countries, for a worldwide total of $439 million. Given its $160 million production budget and additional $110 million spent on promotions, the film needed to earn $450 to $500 million in order to break even. In July 2016, The Hollywood Reporter said the film lost the studio around $15 million, although noted several executives put the losses in the $30–40 million range. 46. Worldwide, it became the highest-grossing film based on a video game. It was the first video game film to cross $400 million in ticket sales globally. and was also only the second Hollywood release, after Terminator Genesis, to earn $100 million in China without making $100 million in the United States. In the United States and Canada, Warcraft opened on June 10, 2016, alongside The Conjuring 2 and Now You See Me Too, and was projected to gross around $25 million in its opening weekend. Variety reported that the film was generating only moderate interest among U.S. moviegoers, which could possibly hurt its box office performance stateside, with poor reviews and competition from the aforementioned films and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Out of the Shadows, released the week prior, also affecting its performance. The film grossed $3.1 million from 2,632 theaters in its Thursday night previews and $10.7 million on its first day. It went on to gross $24.2 million, finishing second at the box office behind The Conjuring 2, $40.1 million. It fell by 70% on its second weekend, earning $7.2 million. Critical response? On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 29%, based on 233 reviews, with an average rating of 4.4/10. The website's critical consensus reads, Warcraft has visual thrills to spare, but they and director Duncan Jones' distinctive gifts are wasted on a sluggish and derivative adaptation of a best-selling game with little evident cinematic value. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 32 out of 100 based on 40 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. Jeff Berkshire of Variety criticized the film's attempts at adapting a source material with inherent ridiculousness, with regard to how the original game series was not meant to have a very deep narrative. It's an unwaveringly earnest film that never owns up to exactly how campy every character, every conflict, and every new realm truly is. A. Dowd of the AV Club wrote that, to watch Warcraft is never to be transported, but to wade through a thick morass of mythology, exposition, gaudy light show effects, half-assed character development, and formulaic franchise groundwork. While describing director co-writer Duncan Jones as a talented sci-fi fabulist who's fallen screaming into the same CGI abyss that consumed Peter Jackson during his unfortunate Hobbit cycle. Helen O'Hara, reviewing for British GQ, stated that although the film itself is a strong adaptation of Warcraft, the script diminishes the film's impact. The problem is that it just can't escape those cod fantasy roots. There are too many mysterious proper nouns being thrown into conversation, and at least 12 major characters competing for space. We're zipping from one to another here so quickly that they only have time for the most portentous and sometimes cliched dialogue. Sherry Linden of The Hollywood Reporter gave the film a positive review, citing the performances and story as highlights. Brian Truitt of USA Today also praised the acting, particularly Kebble's performance as Durotan. Kebble's performance showcases the nuances of a father gripped by the no-win situation of having no home and his family in constant danger. Truitt also stated that he found it was not necessary for viewers of the film to have prior knowledge of the Warcraft series to enjoy the film. First, a confession. I have never played any incarnation of Warcraft. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Be upfront about it. We're all friends here, we should be honest with each other. So I went in with an open mind to Warcraft, the movie based on the video game, and I'm reviewing it purely on its own merits as a standalone entity. Many of you out there may read this and cry foul. She's never played the game. She has no idea what she's talking about, and I'm okay with that. Really, I am. But I'm also hoping that the game is more emotionally engaging, or at least, fun, than the movie I just saw. Because that thing was a dour mess. And it brings me no joy to report that to you because Warcraft comes from a filmmaker whose work I've been a big fan of, Duncan Jones. With just 2 features to his credit, Jones has shown a real knack for taking complex sci-fi stories and telling them in clever, intimate ways. His debut, Moon, was my favorite movie of 2009. It was about mind-blowing existential stuff, but it had real verve, immediacy, and heart. Plus, if one Sam Rockwell is good, 2 Sam Rockwells are great. Jones' 2011 follow-up, the time travel puzzle Source Code, felt like a bit of a letdown by comparison, but it was thrilling and challenging, and it showed his evolution as a filmmaker with a bigger cast and more expensive toys. So it's hard to figure out what happened with Jones and Warcraft. It's as if the endeavor swallowed him whole. This was clearly a formidable undertaking filled with sweeping imagery, motion capture performances, and tons of visual effects, all being projected in overwhelming IMAX 3D. In the midst of all that, it's difficult to hear his voice, to see his attention to detail. An enormous budget and state-of-the-art technology have resulted in a movie that looks cheesy and cartoonish, a big screen version of a video game world that more closely resembles the video game commercials you see on TV. But Warcraft is difficult to follow from both a visual and a narrative perspective, with massive battle scenes between orcs and humans, in which it's difficult to tell who's doing what to whom. Similar to luggage at the airport, many orcs look alike. Hulking, tusked, muscular, and festooned with fierce accoutrements, they're like refugees from a Gwar concert. But eventually you don't know whether you're looking at a good orc or a bad orc, and the CGI spectacle of it all renders everything with a glossy, detached sameness. Forgive me for wanting a little realism in my orcs, because yes, that's what Warcraft is about. Orcs and humans, and their noisy efforts to enter each other's realms and destroy each other. But the mythology is much more dense than that. The script from Jones and Charles Leavitt contains reams of expository dialogue, yet the story itself feels mind-bogglingly convoluted. And yet, in between the self-serious, stilted conversations, we get snippets of quippy, anachronistic banter that are meant to provide humor, but instead end up being jarring. The film begins with Orc warrior chief Durotan, Toby Kebbell, his pregnant wife Draka, Anna Galvin, and their clan leaving their dying world by passing through a portal that looks like a wall of swirly minty mouthwash. On the other side is the more peaceful and pastoral Azeroth. Although every sparkly, new fantasy realm we enter here calls to mind a place we've visited previously at some point in the Lord of the Rings saga. There's a lot of borrowing going on in Warcraft. Once they arrive, they attack the humans for control of the land. Knights led by Durotan's counterpart, the noble but personality-free Lothar, Travis Fimmel, the Brooklyn pickle entrepreneur of Rebecca Miller's Maggie's Plan. But while Lothar dutifully serves his king, Dominic Cooper, and queen, Ruth Negga, Durotan begins to question the motives of the clearly insane and power-hungry orc warlock Gul'dan, Daniel Wu. The fact that Gul'dan has pulsating green eyes and likes to drain people of their life force to fuel his own magical abilities may have something to do with it. The humans have a powerful wizard of their own, Medivh, or the Guardian, as he's known. He's played by Ben Foster in a bit of casting alone that suggests perhaps he's not to be trusted. And sure enough, Foster tries to bring glimmers of his trademark menace to the character, but it's hard to act amid all the noise. Basically, he's called upon to transport himself and others from place to place by stringing together strands of glowing blue light and chanting a few spells. In the midst of this struggle is Garona, Paula Patton, who's half human, half orc. The fact that she's being held prisoner and is dressed in chains and tatters for maximum sex appeal provides an uncomfortable racial element to the action. But Warcraft seems more interested in exploiting her character for titillation rather than exploring her significance from a societal perspective. Between this and the latest Adam Sandler Netflix debacle, The Do-Over, the charismatic Patton is having a rough couple of weeks. She deserves better. Eventually, alliances must be forged to save humanity and orc kind alike. But first, young mage Khadgar Ben Schnetzer, an ally of Lothar's, must learn the secrets hidden inside a purple room that's meant to be futuristic, but looks like a rejected set from Logan's Run. There's also a giant evil statue made of clay that comes to life, but it's more unintentionally hilarious than frightening. And before there can be any peace, there is pummeling, lots and lots of pummeling, as the orcs fight the humans as well as each other under hot, dusty skies. It is brutal, it is repetitive, it is numbing. And just as it's ending, Warcraft leaves all kinds of plot threads dangling for the ambitious possibility of a sequel. But you'll be likely to cry game over because this first one is easily a contender for the worst movie of the year. The epic battle at the center of Warcraft isn't the clash between humans and orcs. That's just what takes up roughly 2 hours of screen time. The true conflict comes from filmmakers trying to tell a story with soul and struggling against the inherent ridiculousness of the commodity they're working with. It shouldn't take a mage to foresee that this pricey and preposterous adaptation of an online gaming phenomenon was preordained for artistic mediocrity. Ditto Garona, Paula Patton, a slave claiming to be half-orc, half-human, who makes her way through the portal and finds herself torn between the two sides. She quickly gets cozy with Lothar, but it's hard to take Patton or the character seriously with her Star Trek alien-esque green skin and the oversized fangs jutting out from her jaw, looking like a last-minute find in the Halloween store bargain bin, and making her sound like she has a mouth full of magic beans. And that goes to the root of the problems with Warcraft. It's an unwaveringly earnest film that never owns up to exactly how campy every character, every conflict, and every new realm truly is. Ben Foster has another central role as reclusive wizard Medivh, a guardian of Azeroth, who has been not so subtly dabbling in dark magic. He's introduced sculpting a golem, surely you'll recall the old chestnut about Chekhov's golem, shirtless and wild-eyed. But it takes Lothar quite some time to piece together the warning signs. Medivh should be fun, but Foster's deadpan turn is, like the movie around him, a drag. With its meticulously detailed realms built out primarily on sound stages and enhanced via CGI during extensive post-production, Warcraft aims for fresh and eye-popping, and yet ends up shop-worn and rather tacky. It fits into a long line of visually audacious Hollywood gambles. In success, you wind up with a sleeper that few see coming, like 300, or if you strike the bullseye, a phenomenon like Avatar. But the ones that miss The Spirit, Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, Sucker Punch, tend to tank hard. Boasting more than 2,000 visual effects shots, it's dispiriting to think about the time, energy, planning, and precision that went into Warcraft when the final product brings to mind those animated advertisements for iPhone app games. So good at making the most outlandish elements of his first two films seem completely credible, Jones can't find a way to get this cartoony spectacle to soar. His heartfelt approach to the material only underlines the silliness. Production designer Gavin Bouquet, costume designer Maze C. Rubio, and visual effects supervisors Bill Westenhofer, Jeff White, and Jason Smith lead the heavy lifting on the artisan side, since what the producers essentially purchased with the source material is a collection of locations, wardrobe, weapons, and spells. Warcraft ends with a setup for a sequel, but also the feeling that if this is what combat looks like, it's time to give peace a chance. Having never played the game on which the movie is based, I can see why the basic plot would appeal to people. I can also see how the filmmakers stretched the limits of their imagination and budget to make something feature-length worthy. For the most part, it sort of worked, except in the parts that it didn't. Part of what makes the movie, or this genre, so entertaining is seeing well-respected actors say the hokiest dialogue or emote against CGI creations, while remembering that with the money from this movie, they can afford that boat or that house, and that next time they can act for that prestigious award in a Holocaust drama or 9/11 drama, or play the gorilla that got shot for dragging that 3-year-old. But for now, you strap on that wizard mage hat and act your pants off in another made-up language, thinking if it worked for Ian McKellen in those Lord of the Rings movies but not really in those Hobbit movies, then it should work for me. Synopsis. The orcs need a new world as the one they currently inhabit is rotting and will soon be uninhabitable. Orkland sounds a lot like Oakland, except the orcs stand a lesser chance of getting their car broken into when they leave it on the street for more than 10 minutes. Their leader, I think, Gul'dan, thinks he has a pretty gold idea. He will cross over into the realm of Azeroth, using a gateway from his world into theirs. However, not all the orcs can fit through the gateway, so he can only send his most fearsome warriors to take over. After that's taken care of, he'll send for the rest of the orcs. With me so far? I feel like I'm writing some sort of pathetic fan fiction, but I swear this is an actual plot. Ask anyone who plays the game. There are a lot of you, I know. Gul'dan is in charge of a dominant green magic called the Fel. Ooh. It gives the user a lot of power, but at the expense of other lives. He doesn't know that with great power comes a lot of cliches about wielding great power. Gul'dan seems corrupted by it, but he doesn't seem to care. On the human side, we meet a guy named Lothar, Travis Fimmel, a knight or something, whose sister is the queen and brother-in-law to King Lane, Dominic Cooper. Lothar also has a son who wants to be a warrior like Dad, but you can see just isn't as good. Now would be an appropriate time to say rip to the son character. You knew he was dead as soon as he said something to the effect of, "I want to be just like you." I didn't even bother to remember his name because it wouldn't be important later. Anyway, Azeroth's garrisons are being attacked by Gul'dan's orcs. The humans have wizards/mages who use magic to help protect them. They're called guardians, and they're different from regular humans because their beards are bushier and their robes are robier, and half their dialogue is spoken in some fake language and in deep baritone, so you know it's serious. The main guardian Medeo, Ben Foster, fears that the orcs have the Fel, which is powerful enough to destroy worlds if it fell into the wrong hands. Essentially, giant orcs, led by a vampiric religious elder, invade the human dimension in search of more raw materials, i.e. humans, and a nice place to raise their families. The humans don't like this. There's a heroic orc couple, voiced by Toby Kebbell and Anna Galvin, who are against their evil leader, and there's a heroic human fighter, Lothar, Travis Fimmel, serving a heroic human king, Dominic Cooper, and doubting the virtue of maybe heroic guardians mage Medivh, Ben Foster. It's tedious. What is interesting, though, is half-breed female orc Garona, Paula Patton, painted green after the fashion of beautiful African-American actresses in modern tentpole flicks, who has the above-mentioned line about how broken bones heal stronger. There's a scene between her and the human queen, Ruth Negga, where she's given a dagger with which to defend herself, and she does, in a scene that has more pathos than it should because of it, that feels suspiciously like one woman telling another that the world is dangerous because they have to share it with men. In fact, the best thing about Warcraft is that it's essentially about women leaders. It's about the heroic orc lady giving birth in a liquid void and then launching the baby, Moses-like, into a river when the hordes descend upon her. Her last act among her people? Cutting the throat of an ally, but just a little, to remind him who's really boss in these scenarios. The women are the ones who make the hard choices in this picture, while the men are guided by vengeance and chivalry and notions of nationhood and rank. There's a mano-a-mano battle and talks of ritual, but in the end, when everything's on the line, it's Garona's call-out of the ritual that essentially creates a temporary truce and the achievement of every goal the men in the film have sought. Her two final actions, the one with the dagger, the other with her manipulation of ritualistic patriarchy, are the spiritual granddaughters of Lisa hiding her fashion magazine in an adventure book at the end of Rear Window. Yes, there's wizard stuff and majestic locales and griffins and things. Yes, the rendering is impressive, and it's almost possible for entire seconds to look at the orcs without marveling at the technology used to animate them. But the real value of Warcraft is in the roughly 10 minutes where it's about the cult of masculinity rather than engaged in it. Duncan Jones is a gifted filmmaker. The best parts of Moon and Source Code deal with the consequences of technology and unfettered achievement, and Warcraft isn't different in that respect. The vast majority of it is fan service, equal parts incomprehensible and familiar to the lay person, which is a shame, though Jones's intelligence and sensitivity linger there in the periphery. They're there in the movie's subtextual critique of its culture. They're in the ambiguity of characters who, even while avenging dead sons, are revealed to have been bad fathers. Warcraft has real pain in it, and loss. I'm on its side the moment it has two of its brutes act like kids who've been friends their whole lives when one playfully hits the other one with a pebble to lighten a heavy moment. It's the worst of Jones's films without question, edited with one of those lettuce choppers and boasting of an interminable third act. But it's still better than it has any right to be because of him. I hope it makes $1 billion in China and buys Jones the freedom to make something that's all his, next time. Warcraft 2016 Movie Review. There has been a war between orcs and humans as long as anyone can remember. Thus is the world of Warcraft. Pun. Apologies. We follow an orc warrior in tow with his warring clan as well as his wife and child-to-be. We also follow a band of humans who are combating the oncoming onslaught of orcs using the magical guidance of the Guardian, Ben Foster. There is also a halfling, Paula Patton, which is to say, half orc, half human, who is caught in the middle of these warring races. The film throws you into a narrative already in motion, in medias res, as is the fantasy genre standard. The problem with this in this particular instance is that the film does not bother cluing the viewer in on the inner workings of the diegetic world. What this results in is the entire setup feeling like an in-joke, a premise only those already in the know going in will understand. This is very limiting in terms of bringing in a mainstream audience. Of course, to define is to limit. You need truly know very little to appreciate the action. Fantasy films suffer from stigmas, mainly due to the abundance of past examples of genre failure. As such, the fantasy action sequence never really gets its due outside of Tolkien adaptations. Here, we certainly bear witness to grand-scale fantasy action on a macro budget, and it pays off when we zoom in on particular moments of swordplay. Action scenes on the whole play out with splendid choreography, albeit with underutilized 3D technology. What crumbles these action sequences to the ground is when we pull back to the grand-scale battle at hand, where warriors are delineated to dot-sized pixels. On the other hand, a handful of shots do look quite good, particularly establishing shots, but the mise-en-scene looks too artificial for it to be worth the extravagant shot. These shots at times show extraordinary depth of field, but it is green-screened. Thus, the cinematic merits of such depth are put into question. Certainly, the animators are deserving of credit for the nuanced textures of the landscape, although these expansive environments are sullied when littered with repetitive avatars as specks moving in battle. These avatars of hulking orc beasts, even when viewed up close, look more video game than photoreal. Though this may be the point, it makes for a film visually worthy of an overproduced cutscene. One stigma of fantasy is the use of fantasy dialects, where beasts speak broken English and man speaks in vague, varying English accents. Here, this tactic is largely abandoned. However, this causes there to be no solidified dialects at all, which acts to ruin realism within the world of the film, and enough of the dialect still remains as to stilt the acting, largely across the board, making it all come off wooden or artificial. Artificial is the keyword when analyzing this film. The brilliance of depth and vibrant visual composition is rendered less impressive due to artifice. Action is choreographed for excitement, but limited by CG character augmentation that emotionally distances the viewer from the battle. When close-up, the camera work is strong enough to make for compelling action, but extreme long shots become meaningless masses of moving dots. And the narrative is nonsensical in its overwrought complexity that is somehow complex without depth. In the end, this leaves us with swinging swords whose glint gets caught on camera just right, and nothing else. Warcraft is in theaters now, bringing the epic war between humans and orcs from video games to the big screen. But with decades of complex fantasy lore to draw on, newcomers may have a few questions. So we've donned our thinking helms to answer some obvious questions the film leaves unanswered. That includes some spoilers, but if you haven't seen the film, this information might help you follow things. What's going on in that duel at the start? The prologue of Warcraft, which director Duncan Jones describes as inspired by spaghetti westerns, looks like a flash forward to the Warcraft era that's most familiar to players, in which the battle between the Alliance and the Horde has been raging for generations. We'd hazard a guess that it's set in a region called the Barrens, judging by some of the improvised Horde-ish structures visible in the background, but that's by the by. The point of this opening scene is to establish a long-running war before we jump back to see the origin of that conflict. What's the Fell all about? The Fell is ancient and corrupting stuff. This eerie green smoky goop is essentially very powerful magic that requires a sacrifice to work. Opening a portal from the orc homeworld of Draenor to the human realm of Azeroth was a massive spell, hence the need for the nasty Gul'dan to suck the life out of so many poor prisoners. Fell is associated with the Burning Legion, who aren't shown in the movie, but are the real bad guys of the Warcraft universe. The Burning Legion was a massive army of demons hell-bent on destruction, and it was this gang of nasties that first corrupted the shamanistic orcs, leading to the invasion of Azeroth that we see in the film. What's the deal with Medivh the Guardian? The Guardians of Tirisfal was a legacy of super-powerful mage types entrusted to watch over Azeroth and defend the realm from the Burning Legion. Being Guardian was a pretty important job, so it's not surprising that King Lan takes Medivh's advice seriously. Unfortunately, Medivh was the last in the line, meeting his end thanks to Sargeras, the horrible chap who created the Burning Legion. Why don't the wizard fellas like Khadgar? In the game, Khadgar was sent by elite magi the Kirin Tor to be Medivh's apprentice. The film doesn't explain why Khadgar has been expelled by his magical masters. How does the magic work? Oof, now you're asking. We've covered Fel dark magic, but the most common magic is arcane magic, the blue stuff in the film. It's just like Harry Potter magic, really, summoned into action through spells and knowledge. Doing magic in Warcraft also requires something called mana, which depletes as you cast spells and needs to be regenerated before you can cast anymore. That might go some way to explaining why we see Khadgar throw a fireball, but isn't doing it, literally all the time. Is Garona half human? Actually, she's half Draenei, at least in the lore of the games. The Draenei are a sort of bluish humanoid alien race who lived alongside the orcs on their homeworld of Draenor, until it all went to pot following the orcish invasion of Azeroth, that is. You can see some Draenei in the film. They're the poor blighters in cages near the start that Gul'dan slaughters to power his portal. They have guns? Isn't that a huge technological advantage? Dwarves are good at building things. This much every fantasy fan knows. Yes, guns, or boomsticks, are powerful, but in a world heavily charged with magic, owning one doesn't make you an unkillable god king. Words of Warcraft, cutting-edge CGI is bringing back acting, says Warcraft star. Is the Warcraft movie any good? A player and a non-player quest to find out. Fans including Duncan Jones remember their WoW experiences. Warcraft around the world. Rounding up the reviews. Hang on, was that Glenn Close? Well spotted. She's uncredited, but IMDb says it's her, and that's good enough for us. Close seems to be playing Elodie, who was the first ever Guardian of Tirisfal, and is a man in the lore of the games. It's not clear what the significance of that cameo is. Maybe we'll see more in a sequel. Who are the other races? The film focuses on the humans and orcs at the heart of the conflict, but there are dozens. Let's take the playable races in World of Warcraft, starting with those who side with the humans on the Alliance side. They are the Draenei, dwarves, gnomes, and Worgen, essentially werewolves. On the Horde side are Tauren, a race of giant cow people, trolls, goblins, and undead, read zombies. The Pandaren, a panda-like race, fight on both sides. Elves are interesting. We see a few high elves during the film, but by the era of Blizzard's MMORPG, they've been largely wiped out. You can't keep a good elf down, however. World of Warcraft features night elves on the Alliance side and blood elves supporting the Horde. What happens to the baby? Possible spoilers for a Warcraft sequel here, which may happen judging by the international box office performance, if not the critical reception. They remind me, honestly, in their loving visual characterization and over-the-top customization of some of the homicidal desert vehicles in Mad Max Fury Road Made Flesh. I was most taken with the rival chieftain who wears 2 complete companion ribcages and spinal columns fused together as a makeshift cape. Warcraft has a lot of video game iconography from which to draw inspiration, of course. Some, not most, but some of its choices are indeed pretty sharp. Due to the clear size disparity, her superior skincare regimen, and comparatively dainty underbite, the other half of Garona's parentage would appear to be human, though that makes so little sense in context that the film, perhaps loath to shoehorn anything else into its already seam-splitting narrative, leaves the mystery not just unsolved but unremarked upon. But my prejudices, which are legion, are showing. A deeper inspection of the film reveals that it is not in fact called World of Warcraft. Leave that for the third sequel, I guess. Director and co-writer Jones, who clearly at least has passing knowledge of the series, is at pains to impress upon the viewer Azeroth's vast scale in terms of distance traveled, but is hampered by his busy scattershot script as to its geographic diversity, which the games, sometimes to their detriment, have to an almost comical degree. An instructive, if perhaps unintended consequence of this is that the viewer spends entirely too much of the movie watching a single character flying between far-flung map points on the back of a winged griffin, which is how transit of the non-pedestrian, non-teleportation variety still happens for millions of WoW players every day. For a movie in which miles beyond count are ostensibly traveled, Warcraft has a deadly, decidedly boxed-in feel to it. Jaw-dropping exterior and interior shots, exactly one apiece, of the wintry dwarven stronghold Ironforge seem to exist entirely in order to hint at how expansive the world of Azeroth might become in obviously hoped-for future installments of the franchise. It doesn't help that these background elements, comparative throwaways like Griffin's Eye aerial POV shots of the sprawling human city of Stormwind, are unequivocally the coolest single visual elements in a movie that has obviously overspent on populating and animating its foreground. Along with the two lead orcs, the feisty Griffin is actually the most eye-catching and engaging character in the film, CGI or otherwise. The dense, mood-lit forest of WoW's Teldrassil, but the most glaring example, is freaking gorgeous in-game, though I understand that in order to be fully realized on film, it'd have to be yet another 100% CGI-rendered element. More's the pity. The closest we get to a visit is watching three incredibly uptight and, frankly, suspicious night elf emissaries look around at each other in amusing consternation and faux outrage every time a new proclamation about the looming war is made. The Warcraft franchise is known for its expansive high fantasy elements, with species and creatures ranging from humans to mythical beasts to cosmic entities, and the 2016 movie included an exciting mix of them. The film received divisive reviews upon its release from fans and critics and suffered from an underwhelming run at the box office. One of the praises for the movie was the CGI creation of its orc characters, who made up a significant portion of the Warcraft cast, while the human portion was clad in majestic fantasy armor. Though the Warcraft movie made many changes to the game, it's based on the 1994 real-time strategy game Warcraft: Orcs and Humans. The original game primarily featured the two playable races mentioned in the title, but the Warcraft franchise was expanded with sequels and the MMORPG World of Warcraft. Over 3 decades, the world's lore has continuously developed, and the 2016 film adaptation tried to incorporate elements that came later to fully ingratiate audiences to the world of Azeroth. The humans in Warcraft are represented by characters like Anduin Lothar, Khadgar, and King Lane Rin. On the Eastern Kingdoms continent, there are several kingdoms of humans, including Gilneas, Dalaran, and Lordaeron. The main focus of the original Warcraft game and the movie is the human kingdom of Stormwind, ruled by the noble line of Rin. When Anduin Lothar first leads the humans north to organize the First Alliance of Lordaeron, several human nations join the cause to repel the orc threat. The humans of Stormwind are one of the main playable races in the franchise, but they're not the only culture explored in the series. When Anduin Lothar first leads the humans north to organize the First Alliance of Lordaeron, several human nations join the cause to repel the orc threat. By the time of World of Warcraft, the humans of Lordaeron had been ravaged by the Scourge, and many had turned undead. The people of Gilneas fell to the Worgen curse. Stormwind still stands as the leadership of the Alliance. The orcs are the main representatives of the Horde, with a fascinating complexity in the Warcraft universe that differs from other iterations of the species in fantasy. While The Lord of the Rings popularized the orcs as mindless beasts, orcs in the Warcraft world were originally a peaceful, shamanistic species. However, many of them were corrupted by a demon lord, causing clans to become violent and bloodthirsty, as exemplified by Gul'dan in the movie. It wasn't until the rise of Thrall that the orcs were able to re-achieve stability and peace from the leadership of their shamanistic ways. Orcs come from the world of Draenor and were brought to Azeroth through the Dark Portal, beginning the first war against the humans, which is depicted in the film. This war was caused by the violent majority of the orcs, led by Gul'dan and Blackhand, and it wasn't until the rise of Thrall that the orcs were able to re-achieve stability and peace from the leadership of their shamanistic ways. Like humans, dwarves are a race that populates the Eastern Kingdoms, primarily in the Khaz-Modan region. Their culture closely resembles the dwarves in J.R.R. Tolkien's world, known for enormous cities and structures built underground and in the mountains like Ironforge, Grim Battle, or Shadowforge. They're also known for their expertise in craftsmanship, shown in the movie in a brief scene where Lothar travels to Ironforge. Like the other races, dwarves are divided into kingdoms and clans, with the dwarves of Khaz-Modan and the Wildhammer clan of Airy Peak both joining the First Alliance of Lordaeron. They're a popular playable race in the games, and were initially introduced in Warcraft 2 with the Griffon Rider and Demolition Squad units, which laid the foundation for their role and culture in the franchise. There are many different forms of elf in the Warcraft universe. Players of the MMORPG may recognize the Night Elves as the Alliance race and Blood Elves as the Horde counterpart. The High Elves depicted in the 2016 movie are settled in the northern region of Eastern Kingdoms, Quel'Thalas, and are descendants of the elves from Kalimdor that migrated across the ocean. The High Elves join the First Alliance of Lordaeron and fight against the orcs in the second game. The land of Quel'Thalas, like Lordaeron, was ravaged by the Scourge and Prince Arthas Menethil. Following this, many of the High Elves renamed themselves as Blood Elves, joining the Horde. They're still the same species, with the difference in terms being political, as the remaining High Elves were exiled from Quel'Thalas for supporting the Alliance. They were prevalent during the Second and Third Wars, though a significant majority of their population was lost during this time. The Murlocs are a staple of the Warcraft franchise as one of the races created originally by Blizzard. They're recognized widely by fans of the games for their distinct, iconic sound effect, which actually makes it into the movie in their brief cameo. The cameo is brief and hard to notice, but one appears near a bridge during a nighttime scene. Murlocs are an aquatic race, typically settled in villages on beaches, lake shores, and rivers, known by many game players as an NPC mob that they've likely killed thousands of. Murlocs never really make a grand imprint on the conflicts in the Warcraft universe, yet they're always present and have indirectly altered events in the course of the world's history. They're not as intelligent a species as many of the main races, but they're civilized enough to communicate, form tribes, and have a religious culture. They're an ancient race in Azeroth, but have only recently begun to dwell inland, having moved on from their previous ocean habitats. Draenei are the last of the playable races in World of Warcraft to appear in the film. They were added to the game in the Burning Crusade expansion as a faction from Draenor, who had to flee their homeworld due to the Burning Legion. Their species is technically called Eredar, but the term Draenor is used to refer to the faction who successfully fled, uncorrupted by the demonic threat. In the beginning of the film, Draenor are held captive in cages, and Gul'dan is siphoning their lives for fel magic fuel. They eventually joined the Alliance after hearing of the humans' valor against the Burning Legion in the Third War. For most of their time, the Draenei lived in peace with the orcs on Draenor before the Burning Legion corrupted the orcs. The violent, corrupt orcs slaughtered Draenei in masses. Eventually, the species escaped Draenor on an enchanted floating city called the Exodar, using it as a ship to travel to Azeroth and settle in Kalimdor. They eventually joined the Alliance after hearing of the humans' valor against the Burning Legion in the Third War. Fans of World of Warcraft will recognize griffins as the quintessential flying mount of the Alliance. The half-eagle, half-lion creatures are highly intelligent and powerful, as demonstrated in the Warcraft movie ending, making them loyal pet companions. They were first introduced in Warcraft 2 as a fast-paced flying unit ridden by dwarves, and they continued to be a staple of the Alliance side of the franchise. Official lore states that the dwarves introduced humans to the use of domesticated griffins after the formation of the Alliance, which creates a minor but interesting inconsistency in the film. Lothar rides one throughout the movie, but humans haven't discovered the ability to domesticate these creatures at this point in the timeline. Griffins come from the Airy Peak and the Hinterlands, which are further north past Khaz Modan and not areas well known to the humans of Stormwind during the First War in the games. As horses and griffins are to the Alliance, wolves are one of the staple mounts for the Horde. Each playable race in the games has its own set of mounts, and wolves are the representatives of the orcs. The wolves mounted by the Horde are specifically larger dire wolves, and they exist in both Azeroth and Draenor. For Durotar in Warcraft, they're a representation of his Frostwolf clan, which he migrates to Azeroth. In World of Warcraft, feral wolves are fairly common killable NPCs, and they come in various shapes and sizes for both factions. Like boars and bears, they're one of the most consistent animals that populate the game's forests. The ones seen in the movie are the more intelligent, larger dire wolves that are used as ridden mounts. In the Warcraft movie, Garona, Lothar, and Khadgar try to get the corrupted Medivh to close the dark portal to stop the flow of the Horde into Azeroth. Medivh and Gul'dan opened the portal together from opposite ends under the influence of the Titan Sargeras. Sargeras is one of the mega-villains of the Warcraft franchise, as he's the creator of the Burning Legion whose influence led to the destruction of Draenor and the orcs moving to Azeroth. In the film, Medivh can briefly be seen transforming into Sargeras. The Titans are enormous, planet-sized beings akin to gods and are among the most powerful beings in the Warcraft franchise. Their influence is constantly at play, shaping events across planets to form the game's main narratives. Sargeras, in particular, is the final boss of the Tomb of Sargeras raid, and one of the main antagonists in the Legion expansion. In the same scene in which Sargeras appears, an Infernal is summoned to fight the heroes. Infernals are unintelligent creations of fel energy that can be summoned and utilized by warlocks and more intelligent demons. They're used in the armies of the Burning Legion as siege weapons and warriors, following the destructive commands of their masters in their short lifespans. Infernals are both a common NPC enemy to kill and a tool to be utilized by players in World of Warcraft. The Warcraft movie slightly changes the design of how they appear in the game, but it embodies the necessary threat of the creature. Other summonable creatures, like elementals, serve a similar purpose, but infernals are made using corrupt magic. Warcraft is a movie which has promised to break this mold and begin a successful franchise of video game movies. So far, critics have lambasted the movie, while fans have been generally satisfied. Any film helmed by Duncan Jones is going to pique my interest, especially considering this is his first major blockbuster film. Moon and Source Codes are both quality films in their own right and have established Jones as a hot prospect in Hollywood. However, my experience with Warcraft has been very little. I played the second game when I was younger and wasn't exactly up to scratch on the story or lore of the game, and my only knowledge of World of Warcraft derives from Leroy Jenkins and the WoW episode of South Park. Yet, with a fan base as loyal as they are and a studio as praised as Blizzard, is it safe to say Warcraft has been something of a phenomenon in the gaming industry? Warcraft the movie is certainly no phenomenon, although it is an entertaining summer flick. Most of the film's flaws can be washed down with a side of popcorn and soda. The opening scene of the film was superb. It really drew me in and established the orc arc of the story. Yet as soon as we went to the human plot, the film fell flat on its face. The first 30 minutes of this film jumps from location to location so frequently it's jarring. Azeroth should be an entity in its own right, yet I never truly felt like the film stayed in one place for me to establish a connection to it. The human characters also felt largely undeveloped, as we never really know who the true protagonist is, and many of the characters deliver lines so wooden, it feels like Hayden Christensen wrote them. I was excited to see Travis Fimmel playing a leading role in a film, yet his character Lothar just felt like a carbon copy of Ragnar from Vikings. The orcs are the true stars of the film, as the motion capture CGI is stellar and the voice acting is great. Durotan felt like the most defined character and had me rooting for him the whole film. It's strange when your CGI characters are the most intriguing in the film, but this is largely due to their story arc being clearer and easily explained. About halfway through the film, it stops holding your hand and the exposition is left in the shadows. This made some scenes a bit confusing as a non-fan of the franchise. Even though I was a little confused at times, the second half of the film really took off. The film went in directions I didn't see coming. Sure, we got a climatic battle scene, but the conclusion was not what I expected. It sets itself up for a sequel, but it does it in an interesting way that doesn't feel like a cop-out. The action was brutal to watch, with more an emphasis on blunt force and some high fantasy violence that I haven't seen since the Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean films. The film also kind of deals with the issue of too many characters by killing a good chunk of them off. The critical backlash, though, has been embarrassing. These critics, as of late, have become more pretentious, a word I really hate to use, and far less objective. Many reviews claim it's an adaptation of World of Warcraft, which is incorrect, and can't seem to see it as anything other than a video game film. Steve Rose wrote in his review for The Guardian, "The prospect of a predominantly white European realm being invaded by foreign, primitive, darker-skinned hordes, they are actually called the Horde, might set alarm bells ringing in our current climate of immigration anxiety. It's a fucking fantasy film based on popular lore, not a social commentary on the fucking Syria crisis." Maybe because growing up watching superhero shows, fantasy video games, and movies and comics have made films like Warcraft and X-Men less silly for me, but the negativity I've seen from so-called film critics blows me away. Maybe because we don't have a new Transformers for everyone to pan, they've chosen Warcraft as the sacrificial lamb. There appears to be no middle ground these days for films like this. I said in my Gods of Egypt review that we need truly awful films to set a benchmark so that we can judge other films accordingly, and Warcraft is nowhere deserving of being that lowly rated. The first half of the film was a tough pill to swallow, yet some interesting characters and intense fight scenes kept me invested till the far superior second half. Warcraft is probably one of the better video game films, although that's not saying a lot, and an entertaining romp. I would like to see a sequel with more developed characters, a more interesting world, and a tighter story. Warcraft fans should be thanking China as they are making a strong case for this franchise to continue. Duncan Jones is a terrific filmmaker. Given his passion and humility, he's an easy guy to root for. Both Moon and Source Code are thought-provoking sci-fi gems that are as rich in character as they are expertly crafted, which makes Jones's latest effort, the messy, ambitious oddity Warcraft, all the more curious. Based on the incredibly popular computer game, this massive epic delves into an age-old battle between orcs and mankind, sworn enemies looking to rid the universe of one another. The focal point of the story is Durotan, Toby Kebbell, a well-respected, fearsome orc warrior who comes to the realization that perhaps the higher-ups in Orcdom may not have the very best of intentions. Things are further complicated by the arrival of Durotan's son. He and his soulmate love their newborn child with all their hearts and will do anything to protect him, but neither entirely look forward to raising their boy in a world this seemingly misguided. On the flip side, we have fearless human warrior Anduin Lothar, a heroic individual whose primary objectives are to defend his kind and to protect his own son, Callan Berkeley Duffield, a challenge that proves to become increasingly difficult. During a battle in Middle-earth, Garona Paula Patton, a half-orc / possibly half-human with no side to truly call her own, is ultimately captured by Anduin Lothar and his men, and eventually she finds herself learning the true nature of those she initially thought to be her enemy. Likewise, after a meeting with Durotan and his mighty squad, Anduin too realizes that perhaps he was quick to misjudge an entire species based on a handful of bad orc apples. As you've probably already gathered, Jones admirably gives us heroes and villains on both sides of a massive war, lending Warcraft a strange complexity that it isn't always completely worthy of. There's a lot going on here, and those not familiar with the game, admittedly, I'm one of those people, might find themselves baffled by a great deal of the goings-on here. It's unfortunate that the majority of the human characters in this film are not all that interesting, but the orcs make up for it, most notably Noble Durotan. As played by motion capture king Toby Kebbell, Koba of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Durotan is clearly the most compelling character in the movie. From the opening scene, as we are witness to the birth of his son, Kebbell's fierce beastie Durotan brings real heart to the movie. It's that heart and commitment to the material that often transcends the cartoony, video game-ish nature of the proceedings. And I have to admit, Durotan and mate Draka make a couple of bold moves in this picture that are as surprising as they are dramatic. Paula Patton proves to be fiercely independent and oddly sexy despite those goofy teeth protruding from her lower jaw, as Garona. Beyond that, kudos to Jones and crew for throwing a pretty terrifying orc villain into the mix. I wish the human characters fared as well. Sadly, they are a mostly uninteresting sort. Of the human contingent, it's Ben Foster who emerges as the strongest of the lot. As the magical, all-powerful Mediv, Foster is at least given an opportunity to have some real fun with his role, particularly in the second half of the picture. There is absolutely no doubt that Jones' heart is in the right place here. He loves Warcraft, and it's clear that he's desperately trying to do right by the source material, but something has been lost in translation. Again, there's a ton going on here. Jones himself has suggested that this is but a tiny slice of the incredibly dense, epic story that makes up the game. But as jam-packed as this movie is, it still feels like massive chunks are missing. There's a romance of sorts involving Garona and another key character that is never fully realized, and even the union between the orcs and mankind feels slightly undercooked. Having said that, there is an appropriate campy vibe on display that at times reminded me of Mike Hodges' Flash Gordon from 1980. Beyond that, there are heavy Clash of the Titans, Avatar, and more obviously Lord of the Rings influences at nearly every corner. For my money, Warcraft is too ambitious and off-the-wall bonkers to be dismissed as a bad movie. It's certainly convoluted and more messy than not, but it does have its moments. At the end of the day, though, this is a film that will probably appeal most to the legions of Warcraft players out there. Whether or not these individuals are willing to leave their computers for 2 hours to watch the movie, however, remains to be seen. Orc don't win beauty contests, it's just a fact. The protruding tusks, the squinty, hate-filled eyes, the steeply sloped forehead, the scarred and pierced, everything. They have faces only a mother orc could love. That doesn't mean orcs aren't loved, though. For all of their growling and chest-thumping, drooling and pillaging, they have loved ones. They have families. And it's his family that drives Durotan, the Frostwolf chieftain, to the human land. He's seeking a new life. A life where he can raise his newborn son, a life free from corruption. Durotan isn't stupid. He can see that the dark magic the shaman Gul'dan used to open a portal to this land is the same malevolent Fel magic that laid waste to his old homeland. And he can recognize that Fel is beginning to corrupt this human world of Azeroth, too. Something must be done. Durotan must consider the long view of things. Stopping Gul'dan's evil might mean bitter enemies must find common ground, that foes must become allies for the greater good. So he decides that the human warrior Lothar is likely the best one to approach. The man is a seasoned fighter, but a creature of sense, it seems. He also has ties to the human king. If those loyal to Durotan join forces with the humans, they might be strong enough to prevail. Of course, that will make Durotan a traitor in the eyes of many. It won't be pretty, for sure, but then nothing in an orc's life is pretty. Self-sacrifice for those you love is a common theme on both sides of the human and orc battle lines. Humans and orcs alike face impossible odds to save the innocent, and besides the general sacrifice in battle, Durotan is willing to allow himself to be publicly pummeled by great power just to prove to his brothers that Gul'dan's magic is a foul and corrosive thing. The human king Lane, for his part, chooses to give up his life for the greater good. It's easy to see Christ-like parallels in some of those selfless acts. Lane realizes that giving up his life could diffuse the evil at play and open a path to peace. His wife later says, "There is no greater blessing a city can have than a king who would sacrifice his life for his people." I cannot fault the film where the cast is, as they are outstanding. Travis Fimmel as Sir Anduin Lothar, the lead protagonist for the Alliance. It does appear that Fimmel came straight from filming Vikings, though he's as perfect for the role of charismatic, badass Anduin Lothar, so we will not be faulting him in any way. Paula Patton as Garona, the half-orc. The film did not explain what the other half is, but the fans know. She was brilliant in this, and yes, some changes were made, but it worked to help develop her in this story. Out of everyone in the film, I feel she was most underused with her outsider perspective. It could have been useful to have her as the audience's eyes and ears. Ben Foster as Medivh, the current Guardian. I really hope the film gets a sequel, so it's shown where Medivh's true loyalties lay. But Ben Foster did an excellent job bringing the character to life. Its calm, confident, almost detached view of the world versus the more emotional view of his peers, combined with a power rivaled by few others. Hard to play, but Foster pulled it off. Ben Schnetzer as Khadgar. This magic user's backstory was heavily changed, but again it was to have the out-of-water youth for the audience to identify with. About. My understanding is that Duncan Jones's Warcraft is based not directly on Blizzard's massive online role-playing game World of Warcraft, but on the lore from that world that precedes the playable action. The fact that it's a prelude makes a great deal of sense, as this may be the most blatant attempt by Legendary and Universal to launch a franchise that I've ever encountered. I'm all for an epic, ambitious, weird new fantasy saga, but from what we get here, not this one. If you're steeped in knowledge of this realm, perhaps Warcraft presents a coherent story, but for the rest of us, we may be shit out of luck. Though one avid player I talked to indicated that's not necessarily the case. The film throws things at the viewer as if each minute facet of this sprawling, fantastic world is common knowledge. I'm all for not over-explaining every element, for letting context provide a framework. That does, admittedly, happen on occasion, though not often, and frequently we're left to dangle in the wind, wondering what the hell just happened, besieged by a wave of cryptic fantasy names and terms. This is an immersive approach, a kind of sink-or-swim strategy, but unfortunately we're not even taught how to dog paddle. Then the overly busy script from Jones and Charles Leavitt undercuts the attempt to drop the viewer into the midst of this realm. It's primarily made up of exposition-heavy dialogue, where the characters explain their own histories and how they're connected to one another, along with huge dumps of information that weigh down the pace. But even as so many things are hammered home and expounded on in great depth, there are others tossed out as if we know. It's two narrative methods completely at odds with one another. Warcraft tells the story of the first encounter between orcs and humans. Draenor, the home world of the orcs, is dying, consumed by a dark magic called the Fell, which demands life as its cost. The evil shaman Gul'dan, Daniel Wu, leads a group of warriors, including Durotan, Toby Kebbell, and his pregnant wife, Draka, Anna Galvin, through a portal to Azeroth. Though this realm is populated by kings and warriors, it has lived in peace for years, which changes right quick when the Horde shows up on the scene. There is infighting and betrayal, shifting alliances and shadowy allegiances on both sides, and factions on either end want peace while others push for annihilation. Absent is the rich, layered characterization of Jones' earlier movies Moon and Source Code. There's little nuance or subtlety to be found. After witnessing the death of a loved one, a character says things like, "I've never felt such pain," just in case you couldn't tell. Humans can be monstrous, and the monsters may be more human than they look. Characters that shouldn't be trusted damn near tent their fingers and cackle. They're so obvious. Durotan is really the only character with any depth or texture, which isn't saying much. He's a father, a husband, and an honorable chieftain, and he sees the Fell for what it is, a source of death and destruction. Recognizing the reality of the situation, he's torn between duty to his leader, tradition, and defending his own clan. Along with Andy Serkis, Toby Kebbell is one of the greatest motion capture actors working, and that shows. Visually, Warcraft owes a huge debt to Lord of the Rings. The cities, the battles, and especially the dwarves feel like they've been lifted from footage stolen out of Peter Jackson's garage. But the orcs represent a huge step in special effects. The technology used captures deft, minuscule facial movements. Their eyes are fully alive, and though they may be massive, hulking creatures, there's never any question if they're real or not. The same cannot be said in other instances, however, and the quality fluctuates wildly throughout. While the orcs look incredible, other creatures do not, and many scenes are horrific green screen nightmares, to the degree where it's hard to believe they're from the same movie, or that this is ILM's handiwork, unless you account for the Star Wars prequels. It doesn't help matters that the IMAX 3D transfer is atrocious, and if you do see Warcraft, take great pains to avoid this migraine-inducing fiasco that turns the action into a muddy smudge blasted across the screen. This is further exacerbated in every scene with human actors. Maybe it's just that there's not as much to be dazzled by, but the non-CGI performers are, across the board, not good. Viking star Travis Fimmel's hero, Anduin Lothar, always appears on the verge of roid rage tears, like Matthew McConaughey in Reign of Fire, but that's all he does. Never has a king been less regal than Cooper's Lane Wern. The young mage, Khadgar, Ben Schnetzer, is a goofy, out-of-his-depth nerd that would be more at home in a high school comedy, and Paula Patton's half-orc Garona is god-awful. Though the other orcs are magnificently rendered, she's painted green, thrown in a skimpy outfit, and given a comical dental prosthetic. It's almost hilarious how little effort went into her character design. As Medivh, the Guardian, the most powerful magical presence on Azeroth, is the only human performer doing anything remotely noteworthy. He basically plays the wise, all-knowing wizard, but at 35 years old, he's horribly miscast. They also try to make him hunky early on as he walks around bare-chested. Still, unlike anyone else, he embraces the inherent strangeness and the off-kilter nature of this world, and not only appears to be having a great deal of fun chewing the CGI scenery, but is far more interesting to watch than any of his counterparts, to the point where it feels like he's in a different movie than everyone else, like maybe he's privy to something none of the rest of us are. Warcraft is full of orcs and warriors, mages and shaman and magic and wonder and action and bizarre shit at every turn. This could have been spectacular, like a crazy Dungeons & Dragons fever dream come to life. The fact that Warcraft, the long-mooted and eagerly anticipated adaptation of Blizzard Entertainment's industry-dominating video game of the same name, failed so miserably upon release, saved at the box office by an outstanding display in China, is both sad for the continued disappointment of video game to movie adaptations and also the career of director Duncan Jones. The viability and reasoning of turning video games into movie entertainment has and will be rightfully debated as we head forward on the back of this highest-profile experience that failed to ignite the movie-going public's imagination. And it's a shame that Jones, the son of David Bowie and the man responsible for the sci-fi classic Moon, has helmed this project he was so passionate about. It's not hard to see what attracted him to the universe that has enthralled millions for many moons, but along with his screenwriting partner Charles Leavitt, Jones has tried but failed to capture what's so appealing about these fantasy lands to the big screen. Perhaps unfairly labeled by many before release as not only the biggest chance for video game movies to succeed, but a new trilogy to rival Loader, Warcraft had not only the weight of longtime fanatics riding on its shoulders, but a general public expecting the characters, spectacle, and experience that we were so lucky to have with Peter Jackson's masterful series. Jones, though, seems out of his depth to handle all the various elements of the huge universe, and the film's runtime that comes in under 2 hours feels rushed and unfulfilled, as we're thrown into a world filled with orcs, guardians, and people in green makeup with some token prosthetic tusks. We never get the connection we almost instantaneously felt towards, say, Frodo and his merry band, as Jones gives us Vikings, Travis Fimmel's fearsome warrior Anduin Lothar, Toby Kebbell's continuing on his quest to become the new Andy Serkis, dedicated orc chieftain Durotan, Ben Foster's wizard extraordinaire Medivh, and Paula Patton's misjudged orc outcast Garona. But none of these characters or performers feel like figures that can bring the film's rather lackluster story of portal-traveling orcs trying to take over peaceful lands to life. The film's script is sadly one of the year's worst, as dialogue is delivered in wooden fashion and feels like an odd mix of fan service and trying to appeal to a mass audience less inclined to dress up for a LARP party, and for many average moviegoer, Warcraft's intense lore and talk about all manner of fantastical possibilities will be far from engaging. The biggest shame of all about this potentially exciting and fun adventure is that very fact. It has potential. There's moments spread throughout this journey from stunning CGI scenery and battles that could have easily matched Loader for sword lead spectacle, even if some of the film's computer-generated effects seem rather suspect for such a big-budgeted event, that suggest a film that really could have been something special for both the die-hard fans and those that just like good old-fashioned movie escapism. And Jones, as we've come to expect from him over his short career, shows directional ticks that reassure us his long-gestating Moon follow-up, of sorts, Mute is still a film to get rather excited for. There have been a huge collection of worse films than Warcraft released this year, a number of which share just a big of a budget and name-brand recognition. But with the weight of expectation comes standards many expect, and unfortunately for this wannabe franchise starter, which will unlikely spawn films of similar budget and release hype, Warcraft is neither the film fans waited years for or the film movie fans quietly hoped would finally break the video game to movie curse in a big way. I've waited far too long to see the Warcraft movie, as normally I would have shown up on opening night, but travel and E3 kept me away until yesterday evening. It was time to decide for myself if the film was any good, as so far it's been trashed by critics, loved and hated by fans, and turned into at least a financial success by China alone. They really love their Warcraft. Since everyone wants to know your gamer credentials up front, here's my angle. While I am certainly a core gamer, I do this for a living, my experience with Warcraft and its lore is limited. I played a lot of the RTS games, but that was well over a decade ago, so I don't recall much about the plots of those initial games. I skipped World of Warcraft entirely, one major game I've simply never gotten into, partially because I tell myself I don't like MMOs, partially because I know I'd probably get hopelessly addicted to it. Lately, I have been playing a lot of Hearthstone, but you won't exactly learn too much Warcraft lore from doing that. So actually, I do think this all adds up to a pretty unique perspective. I'm a huge video game fan, and I desperately want a big-budget video game movie like this to be good and succeed. But I'm not so entwined in Warcraft itself that it colors my opinion that way. In other words, I wasn't just going to like it because of its homages and accurate representations of characters and places from the games. Unfortunately, I don't like it. And I tried to. I really tried to. Warcraft does a few things right, but overall, its problems are myriad, and try as I might, it's hard to ever stop comparing it to higher quality fantasy from Game of Thrones to Lord of the Rings, and it never ends up even close to the high bar set by either. Much ado has been made of the pacing and editing of the film. It does feel very rushed, particularly the beginning, and scenes begin and end so abruptly sometimes, there's barely a chance to breathe, with characters teleporting all over the world thanks to magic portals and flying griffins. And yet, I don't think there's any magical 40 minutes longer director's cut of Warcraft that's going to solve all its problems. Fans can blame the studio for hacking away at Warcraft until it was bad, but as much as I may love director Duncan Jones, it feels like there was simply too much bad in it from the start. 2016's Warcraft movie has a complicated ending that can be challenging to understand for someone not familiar with the games. It's based on the 1990s real-time strategy game series by Blizzard Entertainment, which was expanded into the MMORPG World of Warcraft in the 2000s and remains one of the most popular game franchises of all time. With decades of lore and world-building to go off, Warcraft seemed ripe to be the next big multimedia franchise, but the 2016 film underperformed critically and commercially, grossing just $439 million at the box office and scoring 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Warcraft sees the orc leader Gul'dan lead his people out of their dying world, entering Azeroth to conquer and taking prisoners to harvest dark magic from. The human leaders of Azeroth rally to fight back, with King Lane and Anduin Lothar planning to retrieve the prisoners. An orc chief, Durotan, struggles under Gul'dan's vile rule, eventually challenging him to a duel, though he loses due to Gul'dan cheating and using fell magic. In the final battle, King Lane tells the orc Garona to kill him, and Lothar just barely escapes with Lane's body. On the battlefield, King Lane commands Garona to kill him, with his intent being to see her placed in a position of honor and power among the orcs. The orcs value strength, but Gul'dan's leadership is dark and corrupt, misrepresenting the peaceful race they can be. Lane believes that peace between humans and orcs can be achieved if the right leaders are present on both sides, and in sacrificing himself, Garona can gain the respect of her people and lead them in the right direction. At Lane's funeral, Lothar and Khadgar discuss what happened, with the latter in disbelief that Garona would kill Lane. Despite Garona allowing Lothar to leave the battle with Lane's body, he feels that she's made her choice to side with the orcs after spending much of the film caught in between. King Lane makes his sacrifice in the hope that peace will eventually be reached between the two factions. In the Warcraft universe, there are several schools of magic used for different purposes. Fell magic is one of the darkest schools, as it's fueled by draining life from other beings, and Gul'dan is notorious for using it. In the film, he only brings his most elite warriors to Azeroth to begin their campaign, with the goal of eventually reopening the portal to bring the rest of their race through. To open the portal, Gul'dan corrupts the Guardian, Medivh, using his magical strength. Gul'dan also uses his captured human prisoners to drain them for fell magic fuel, bringing more of his people through from Draenor. Gul'dan is also seen using other species to drain magic from them, including captured Draenei and even an innocent deer in Azeroth. The Warcraft movie opens with a flash-forward duel between a human warrior and an orc, setting up the two duels of the film's ending. Durotan challenges Gul'dan to Mak'gora, in which Gul'dan cheats by using his fell magic, killing the noble Durotan to the dismay of the many spectating orcs. Mak'gora is a tradition of the orcs of Draenor, used as a ritualistic duel to death, often to gain the leadership of a clan. Durotan was the leader of the Frostwolf clan, but he hoped to become the leader of the orcs by defeating Gul'dan. Yes, it's a mess. Most of it feels adapted from a Wikipedia page. None of the emotional beats land. Even the better ones needed a lot more time to build. There are hints of a much better 3-hour film here. Then again, there are also hints of a much better 45-minute film here. And it ends on a pseudo-cliffhanger that ultimately makes it feel like a really expensive television pilot. But at all times, Warcraft goes big. It goes ambitious. It goes for the crazy when it could simply go for the safe. The film has real narrative stakes, vaguely complicated characters, and a genuine conflict where both sides are a little bit right. It lets itself down in the end with some cheap, slay the demon antics, but it's also not afraid to make major changes to its status quo throughout. So let's see if we can't figure out what this movie was trying to accomplish by reverse engineering the recipe behind it. One of critics' most common complaints about Warcraft is also what I liked best about it. The film simply drops you into the middle of a complicated alternate world and assumes you'll catch up, tossing out weird names, Gul'dan or Lothar, and strange terms, the Fell, the Frostwolves, and hoping you'll figure everything out. I'll be honest. Unless you are a student of the Warcraft video games, or at least the Warcraft wiki, there is probably no way to catch everything the film talks about. It's never immediately clear how its two governments, Orc and Human, are structured. And lots of the movie's plot revolves around lines of succession and obscure political and religious rituals. If you're expecting Warcraft to provide explanations for everything, you are going to be sorely disappointed. Related the Warcraft games and mythology, explained. But if you can somehow let go and lose yourself in the movie, you'll realize that understanding every little detail probably isn't necessary. All you need to know is that the Orcish homeland has been corrupted and is collapsing, so the Orcs have invaded the human land of Azeroth. The humans justifiably fight back, and that's that. Seemingly dozens of characters are caught in the middle of the fray, from troubled warrior Lothar, Travis Fimmel, to mysterious orc slave Garona, Paula Patton, to the protective wizard Medivh, Ben Foster. They occasionally fall into the "and then X character did Y, so A character did B" of Wikipedia plot summaries, but Warcraft at least makes an attempt to differentiate their hopes and desires from each other. Hey, if nothing else, the movie made me spend a good hour clicking around on the aforementioned Warcraft wiki to try to figure some of this out. If you don't mind your popcorn movies giving you extra credit assignments, Warcraft might be fun for you. Director Duncan Jones of the much-lauded sci-fi films Moon and Source Code can bring the epic sweep. Toward the end of Warcraft, when the Orcs and humans have finally escalated into full-on war, he serves up some visuals that are right out of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings playbook, where the camera glides over the battlefield, surveying all the devastation. Unfortunately, these shots don't have any emotional core. Their only purpose is to look impressive. Jackson's hidden skill was that he could use his wide shots to highlight the various Lord of the Rings characters we'd come to care about as they navigated the melee. Jones rarely does that. He's on better ground when he instead thinks small. Warcraft's opening sequence follows one man facing off with one orc before Jones's camera pins itself to the orc's side while the beast rumbles across the wasteland to smash the human with its hammer. It's a pretty cool shot, and it drives the point of the film home. These two races don't have to be in conflict, but they are. And that nods toward Warcraft's other primary fantasy influence, TV's Game of Thrones. The film displays a similar lack of interest in following rigorous timelines or making sure it's only cutting between events that are happening simultaneously. But it also boasts a refreshing embrace of the complexity of its situation. The orcs really don't have anywhere to go. The humans really don't want to share their world. There are good and evil characters on both sides. The emotional scenes between humans in this movie are so bad. So bad. In one scene, Lothar loses someone very important to him, but it's hard to care because the other character is played by an actor who's so distractingly flat that you can't believe Lothar would be so worked up over the loss. That scene is followed by one where Garona comforts Lothar, and it seems to exist solely because Jones and co-screenwriter Charles Leavitt thought it was time to have the male and female leads faint toward romance. She nuzzles him while he says, "I have never been in so much pain in all my life," because that's the way you indicate your character's emotional depths. The orcs fare better and feature in several scenes that are legitimately intriguing on an emotional level, as Dorotan, Toby Kebbell and Draka Anna Galvin, struggle to build a new life and raise a family in a culture where warfare and battle are seen as the chief reasons to be alive. All of the emotional subtlety the humans lack, the orcs have, and it's really weird. Jones sometimes bites off more than he can chew, particularly with those massive battle scenes. But for the most part, he seems to have aimed his film toward what might look the most like an Iron Maiden cover, circa 1983. And it works. Most of the time, Warcraft is pretty fun to look at. Giant griffins swoop out of the sky with warriors astride their backs. The film's villain, who's way too easy to guess, grows stalactites from his face when his true demonic nature is revealed. Dwarves holster pistols called boomsticks, and they have a pleasing heft. There's a scene late in the movie where the king, Dominic Cooper, is riding off into battle, and he tells his tiny son to guard his mother and sister, smiles winningly at his wife, the great Ruth Negga, then completely snubs his daughter. It's hilarious, or it would be if it weren't so telling of how little time Warcraft devotes to its women. This is in spite of having some great actresses playing those women, like Negga and Patton. The movie even centers much of its emotional arc on Patton's character, then occasionally seems to forget she's even around because it needs to spend more time with the wizard bros, the bros going off to war, and the bros ruling both races. Warcraft occasionally reveals an egalitarian spirit when a woman warrior or two pops up in the extreme background. But come on, Warcraft. You know you really want to be. There is a version of this movie that is 2016's Mad Max Fury Road, and it is so close to that instant action classic that I'm a little mad it didn't get all the way there. If you think back to the most common critical complaint about Warcraft, an unwillingness to explain much of the film's mythology, that's also true of Fury Road, which simply drops you into the passenger's seat of a car and sends you on one wild ride. But where Warcraft falls short is in the fact that Jones is not as skilled a director as George Miller. Miller eats, sleeps, and breathes action cinema. And even when you're wondering, say, who the bald weirdos are that Max is running away from, Miller is keeping you so tightly focused on Max's every move and how little room for error he has that you don't mind the confusion. It becomes pleasant. Warcraft lacks that propulsion, and it should be said, Max's proto-feminist spirit of inclusion. There are long scenes where the characters talk and talk and talk, and you suddenly realize you have no idea what they're talking about. And yet, there are moments when the film simply takes flight and busts out these crazy visuals that are unlike anything else you'll see this summer. I haven't played a Warcraft game in years and have never played World of Warcraft, but I spotted quite a few fun Easter eggs that fans of the game should enjoy. It's clear that Jones loves this world. Maybe Warcraft 2, which is more likely than you'd think thanks to those China numbers, will better communicate his passion. I guess the cartoon aspects helped the studio get away with cramming more gore and blood into a PG-13 movie than is necessary, but it added a lot of weight and meat. Don't forget the meat to the fights we get. It's a good thing. My experiences with the Warcraft lore did help squeeze a lot more love out of this flick than perhaps was warranted. When Kodar flew to Darren, my jaw dropped. I've seen that place before. Hell, I've lived. There I recognized places and spires, and as cynical as my wretched body is, my face broke out into smiles. So too did I grin when the Black Rock orcs were mentioned. I've ran that dungeon and fought them, or when different places were mentioned in passing, such as the Searing Gorge. Hell, the final battle takes place in what becomes the Blasted Lands. I've been all over Azeroth, and seeing that world come to life in this way was moving in such a thick, nostalgic way that I find it hard to hate this movie. At the end of the day, Warcraft 2016 is a problematic movie with a few things going for it and a lot of heart to boot. At least a full third of it is a mess, and I'd be hard-pressed to recommend this to anyone with little knowledge of Warcraft. But hell, I had some fun. The magic was worth the price. Admission, and I got to see someone polymorphed into a sheep. No other movies out there will give you that. This film, directed by Duncan Jones, written by Charles Leavitt, Duncan Jones, produced by Charles Roven, Alex Gartner, Thomas J.N.J. Stuart Finnegan, starring Travis Fimmel. Paula Patton, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Toby Kebbell, Ben Schnitzer, Robert C. and Sky Daniel Wu. Cinematography Simon Dugan. Edited by Paul H. Music by Ryan Jati. Production companies Legendary Pictures, Blizzard Entertainment, Atlas Entertainment. Distributed by Universal Pictures. Release states May 24, 2016 in El Grand Rex, June 10, 2016 in United States. Running time 12:03 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $160 million. Box office